From Spitfires and rocket launchers, all the way to interrogations and bats. There were many sounds that made up World War II. Welcome back to Most Amazing Top 10. Here are the top 10 unsettling sounds from World War II. Starting off our list at number 10, air raids. An air raid in progress. I couldn't even imagine how terrifying this would sound in real life, let alone experience. I remember my grandmother explaining this to me when I was a wee little young tot, and I never forgot it ever since. But as World War II began, these regulations came into play, these new regulations. Like blackout regulations, for example. When there was a blackout, it didn't mean all the power went off. Blackouts are when families would have to cover up all the windows at night to make sure no light escaped, so that no planes flying overhead could see anything. Street lights were also shut off, of course, and if headlights were needed on your car, they had to cover up all of them except for one little slit of light. When enemy planes were seen, these air sirens would sound. At this point, you would make your way to a shelter or be on fire spotting duty. Number 9. Fire engines. So after these explosives were dropped on cities, we needed to, of course, put them out as quickly as possible. Not only is the fire causing damage to the cities, but also it's illuminating the area. All things we can't have during World War II, of course. So Britain prepared for the worst at this point. They created an auxiliary fire service with over 25,000 members. 18 to 60, that's your job, sorry. September 1940, the Blitz happened. These were the largest fires seen since the Great Fire of 1666. The sounds of a fire engine in the 40s meant that it was already too late. More often than not, these fire service members were working 15-hour shifts, and quite literally the worst conditions in history. Number 8, Spitfires. Moving our attention now to the skies, the sound of Spitfires were one often you didn't forget. Spitfires, or submarine Spitfires, were the most common in terms of fighter planes for World War II. The British single-seater helped bring victory in the Battle of Britain, and during World War II, squadrons of them were based at RAF airfields all over southern England. This was around the time that radar was also first used, so these Spitfires could find their enemy before they even got to their intended target. This is a big deal. The scramble of Spitfires right afterwards meant that a fight was about to go down hundreds of feet in the air, and it sounded something like this. Number 7, the V1. The first of Germany's vengeance weapons. Okay, the only aircraft also to use pulse jet for power, so it's gonna sound different. The V1 flying bomb was an early version of a cruise missile. These were deployed for the London. They were first developed at Peenemünde Army Research Center back in 1939. YouTube won't let me say it, but the Yazis call this the cherry stone. The Yazis, the other guys, I'm not gonna say them. The first was launched at London on June 13th, 1944. These missiles were fired from facilities along the French and Dutch coasts. And yes, you definitely would have heard them pass. Or worse, approach. Number 6, the Katyusha. The Katyusha multiple rocket launcher sounds intimidating by that name alone. It was first built in the Soviet Union during World War II. It was the first mass-produced self-propelled rocket artillery. Now, of course, this sounded haunting. It was loud. They didn't have that great of an accuracy, but with multiple rockets launching all at the same time within 10 seconds apart, it didn't really make a difference if they were close or not. It's doomed. The downside was that these behemoths took a while to reload. Between 1941 and 1945, the Soviet Union produced around 10,000 of these multiple rocket launchers. At first, these weapons were designed to be fired from warplanes, not vehicles. That's any indication on how loud they go. Number 5, dive planes. Junkers Ju-87 or Stuka were German dive designed by Hermann Pohlmann. The first time one of these nightmares took flight was back in 1935. They made their first debut in combat come 1937. That's when the German Air Force used them during the Spanish Civil War, as well as the Axis forces during World War II. The Yazis designed these planes so that they would emit a loud noise. They made it loud on purpose. They referred to it as the Jericho trumpet. They were designed to weaken the enemy and scare them. And in doing so, the aerodynamics slowed the planes down by 20 miles per hour. So eventually, the sirens were pulled off. Number 4, bats. You would never think of bats as an unsettling World War II sound, but get ready, here we go. Bat bombs were an experimental weapon developed in World War II, which was exactly as it sounds. The idea was bats with incendiary devices attached to them, and they would swoop in behind enemy lines and decimate the enemy. A man by the name of Lytle S. Adams, a dentist named Lytle, believe it or not, was behind this entire idea. A dentist from Pennsylvania Who'da thunk? The 60-year-old was driving home from vacation when suddenly he witnessed thousands of bats exit the Carlsbad Caves, and then he also heard about Pearl Harbor and he began to brainstorm at this moment. These tiny flying mammals could be connected to tiny time-fused incendiary bombs and then released to land on the enemy. This was just 2 months after Pearl Harbor, and then he presented the idea to the White House and the project was approved. However, it was later abandoned in 1943 due to the development of nuclear bombs. Number 3, reindeers. Yeah, you didn't think bats were the only animal weirdly involved in World War II, did you? Let's do it. June 1941, the Germans were attacking the Soviet Union, and it was one of the biggest attacks in history. Britain and US had to send weapons, supplies, anything really, just to keep them afloat, just to keep them in the fight. They sent these supplies through the Arctic Circle. That was the only route, but of course it was littered with U-boats. Thankfully, the British HMS Trident was there to watch the waters, and in turn the Soviets were able to fight on. So as a gift, as a thank you, the Soviets sent the captain of the Trident, the World War II submarine, a gift. What would you send a gift to someone like this? Well, they sent them a live reindeer. They sent him a reindeer, like he's Santa Claus. The British had to accept it because it was ill-mannered if they didn't, so they had to keep now a 6-foot-tall, real-life reindeer on a submarine. Her name was Pollyanna. They brought her on board through a torpedo tube. How sad is this? She was a crew member for 6 weeks also. This wasn't like 1 or 2 weeks where they're like, okay, can we get rid of this thing? The thing's over. 6 weeks. That's a lot of business days. That's so many business days. She slept better than most, believe it or not. She actually shared a room in the captain's quarters. Finally, the Trident returned home to Britain and our leading lady was donated to the Regent's Park Zoo. She's probably like, thank God, I hated that. My ears had to pop for so long. Number 2, Operation Gunnerside. This next one should be a movie. It's already a movie. Damn, okay. We've talked about horrible sounds now that we connect to world events, like the Blitz for example. But what if one of the most daring operations from World War II barely had any sound at all? What if nobody even knew what was going on? What if nobody even knew what was happening? What if the most unsettling sound you heard were the sound of skis clacking together? Could that ever be a possibility? Skis? Could skis be haunting? Well, it depends who you ask. In the early 40s, Germany took over a factory in Telemark so they could make plutonium. Now, originally the Allies sent 30 British Army officers, but they couldn't make it due to weather conditions. So next, they sent 11 Norwegians with skis. Norwegians, ski-gens. I tried, we try here. The Norwegians snuck down the 660-foot ice gorge. They snuck in, laid a bunch of explosives, waited for their hostage to find his glasses. I'm not making that up. He was a Norwegian caretaker. They let him go after. 0 casualties also this entire mission, might I remind you. And then they left on skis. The Heroes of Telemark starring Kirk Douglas. This is a real movie. Check it out if you want to see what I just described in live action. Yeah, it gave us a little break on our dark history here. And finally, number 1, Interrogations. Hans Scharf, who has since been dubbed the Master Interrogator, was living in South Africa with his family, but when he was visiting Germany, that's when the war broke out. So of course he was drafted, but his wife convinced a general not to put him on the front lines, but instead with interpreters. After a handful of mistakes and wild coincidences, Hans became the lead interrogator for the Allied pilots felled in France and Germany. His methods of interrogation, though, changed history, and I had to include it on this list. Usually interrogations are harsh. It's a lot of pressure verbally and then also physically. For example, when he was younger, he witnessed a prisoner get abused. And so from that day on, he vowed to never do the same. It was so bad that it changed his thought process. So his interrogation methods revolve now around using kindness and friendly banter. His method has been studied since and turns out scientifically, yeah, this works better. This way, whoever's on the other side of said interrogation leaks more information, and nobody has to break a digit this time around. Once the war was finally over, Scharf testified against Germans, moved to the States, and began a new career as a mosaic artist. If you want to see his work currently on display, you gotta head to Silurenda's Castle in Disney World. No, I'm not joking. He did that. Those are the top 10 unsettling sounds from World War II. If you want a part 2, you know how to let us know. Comment down below, hit the thumbs up. I've been Taylor McWaters, and we'll see you next time on Most Amazing Top 10. Peace.